It scarred me the most. The situation, that was my man. I love that look, man. You know it's serious.
Quando Rondo slid for his cousin Lul Pab after coming home. There is grief in this story that runs deeper than anything that got reported. There is a federal case that dragged the courts into the middle of one of the most intense beefs in recent hip-hop history. There is a man who walked out of prison carrying all of that weight and made a move that nobody in these streets was prepared for. This whole story is layered, and by the time we get to the end of it, the picture looks completely different from what most people have been assuming. Stay locked in.
Man, people blame me for it. I ain't never blame myself for that, though. And like we've been talking at the beginning of this. I'm down with taking the blame.
Yo, what's good, fam? Welcome back. Today we are going deep into one of the most complicated stories in recent hip-hop history. We are talking about Quando Rondo, the death of his cousin Xavier Robinson. Known to the world as Lou Pab, the federal case that turned a rap beef into a Department of Justice prosecution, and the question on everyone's mind since Quando stepped back into the world. Did he slide? Did he retaliate? And if he did, what did that actually look like? Because the answer is not what anybody expected. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into this wild ride, let me keep it 100 with y'all. People expected Quando Rondo to come home from federal time and immediately move against the people allegedly responsible for his cousin's death. That expectation follows the logic street culture and rap culture run on. But yo, we about to separate the facts from the fiction, the real from the fake. Because what actually happened when Quando came home is a story that is deeper, more complicated, and more human than the revenge narrative anyone was writing. To understand any of this, you have to understand who Lou Pab actually was. Xavier Robinson was not a label associate. He was not a road manager or an industry connection. He was Quando Rondo's cousin. That is blood. When Quando started making noise out of Savannah, Georgia, and eventually built his presence in Atlanta and beyond, Lul Pab was part of that journey from the inside. He was not background. He was family in the fullest sense of the word. And that context is everything. Because when you understand that Lou Pab was family, you understand that what happened in August of 2022 was not a tragedy in the abstract. It was personal in a way that rewires a person at their core. So check it. August 19th, 2022. Quando Rondo, his sister, and Lou Pab were in Los Angeles, near the Beverly Center. At a gas station, gunmen opened fire on the vehicle they were in. Quando and his sister survived without physical injuries. Lou Pab was struck multiple times. He was rushed to a hospital, and despite every effort made to save him, Xavier Robinson died from his wounds. 24 years old, gone. And what made that shooting immediately significant beyond the tragedy itself was the allegation that federal prosecutors would later make explicit. According to those prosecutors, Quando Rondo was the intended target. The gunmen were allegedly there for him. Lou Pab died in an attack that was allegedly designed to kill Quando himself. Let that sink in for a minute. This was not a situation where Lou Pab was targeted and Quando was caught in the crossfire. This was allegedly the reverse. And that distinction has defined everything that followed. But here's where it gets real. To understand why federal prosecutors were making those allegations, you have to go back to November of 2020. You have to go back to King Von. Davon Bennett, known professionally as King Von, was one of the most electric and rising voices in Chicago drill music. He was signed to Lil Durk's Only the Family label. He was one of Durk's closest artists and one of the most important figures in that entire circle. On November 6, 2020, King Von was shot and killed outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. He was 26 years old. The circumstances surrounding his death became immediately connected to Quando Rondo, whose associates were present during the altercation that led to the shooting. King Von's death sent a shockwave through hip-hop, and within Lil Durk's circle, the grief was overwhelming in public. Durk was visibly devastated. OTF went into mourning. And from that moment forward, the dynamic between that circle and Quando Rondo became one of the most volatile tensions in the entire genre. Now, this is where we got to address the federal case, because prosecutors did not just connect those dots privately, they built a criminal case around them. The government alleged that the August 2022 shooting in California was calculated retaliation for King Von's death. More specifically, prosecutors alleged that Lil Durk participated in and helped finance a murder-for-hire conspiracy with one objective: killing Quando Rondo. And before we go any further, let me be absolutely clear. Everything I am about to tell you about Lil Durk's alleged involvement is exactly that: alleged. These are prosecutorial claims. Lil Durk has pleaded not guilty. He has not been convicted. A federal trial is scheduled for August 20th, 2026. None of these allegations have been proven in a court of law. We report what the prosecution alleges, not what has been legally established as fact. With that locked in, here is what prosecutors laid out. They alleged that Lil Durk participated in a murder-for-hire conspiracy targeting Quando Rondo. They alleged the bounty placed on Quando's head was approximately $1 million. They alleged that OTF resources were used to finance and coordinate the plot. They alleged that individuals were sent from Chicago to California specifically to track, stalk, and attack Quando Rondo. And according to the prosecution, those individuals found him at that gas station near the Beverly Center on the night of August 19th, with Lul Pab right there beside him. And right now, as Quando Rondo is out in the world, Lil Durk is sitting in federal custody, facing those exact charges. Arrested in Broward County, Florida in October 2024, the man prosecutors allege put up $1 million to have Quando killed is behind bars, waiting on trial. That is the backdrop to everything happening right now. Let me break down for y'all what that means on a human level. If prosecutors are correct, a beef that originated in the rap world, amplified by the loss of King Von, allegedly crossed into federal criminal territory in a way that ended the life of a 24-year-old man who was not anyone's enemy. Xavier Robinson died not because of anything he did. He died allegedly because he was standing next to the person someone wanted dead. That is the weight of this story. That is why this is not gossip or drama packaged for content. This became a matter that the United States Department of Justice decided was worth pursuing at the highest level of federal prosecution. And now the man allegedly behind it all is locked up. Quando is out, and the streets have been watching every single move he makes. Now let's talk about Quando Rondo and the immediate aftermath of losing Lou Pab. Because what he did and said publicly after that night tells you a lot about where his head was. He grieved openly. He honored Lou Pab using Tupac Shakur's Life Goes On, one of the most recognized memorial expressions in hip-hop history. Real talk, that was not a war cry. That was a man broken open by the loss of someone he loved. But grief and silence do not mean inaction. And that is exactly what made the streets start asking questions. Because Quando Rondo has never been the type to just let things ride. So when he went quiet after Lul Pab died, people started paying very close attention to what he was doing next. The real kicker, though, is what was happening underneath the surface. Losing a cousin who died allegedly in your place carries guilt, alongside the sadness in a way that most people never have to experience. You do not just mourn their absence. You carry the weight of knowing they were there because of you. In that car, at that gas station, on that night. That kind of grief can calcify into something cold and calculated, something patient. And patience in the streets looks a lot like planning. So when Quando started moving differently after Lou Pab died, people were not reading it as peace. They were reading it as preparation. But here's where it gets interesting. On the surface, Quando Rondo began talking about leaving the streets behind. He started addressing his gang affiliation publicly, signaling that he wanted distance from that world. He spoke about dropping the set, about removing himself from the cycle that had already cost him so much. Now, for some people watching, that looked like change. But for others, it looked like a man making sure he was not on anybody's radar before making his next move. And that ambiguity is exactly what has kept people locked in on his every step since he came home. And then it went even deeper. Quando Rondo turned toward Islam. He began praying, studying, incorporating the language of his faith into how he talked about his life and his future. On one hand, that is a genuine spiritual transformation that deserves to be taken seriously. But on the other hand, the streets have seen people use a public image of peace and faith as cover before. So the question that nobody could shake was simple. Is Quando Rondo actually changed, or is he moving smart? Because a man who lost his cousin in an attack allegedly meant for him, with the alleged mastermind now sitting in federal custody, has every reason to want to handle things quietly. His song, Life Goes On, added another layer to all of this. It drew its emotional energy directly from the grief of losing Lou Pab. But the song was not a revenge track. It was not a diss. It read like a farewell to grief, and a step towards something new. And yet the people closest to that world were not so quick to take it at face value. Because in the streets, sometimes the loudest message is the one that never gets said out loud. Now, this ain't just about the music. Because even as Quando Rondo was publicly moving toward faith and away from street life, the legal system had its own timeline running. Quando was originally arrested in December of 2023 on drug conspiracy charges. In August of 2024, he pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to possess and distribute marijuana. He was sentenced to 33 months in December 2024 and began serving his time in January of 2025 at the Edgefield Federal Correctional Institution in South Carolina. And here is what made that timing significant. While Quando was doing his time, Lil Durk was getting indicted. The federal government was building the murder for hire case. The alleged architect of Lul Pab's death was getting hemmed up in the very system that had just taken Quando off the streets. When Quando walked back out, the whole landscape had shifted. Durk was the one in the cage, and Quando was free. After serving 15 months, Quando Rondo was transferred out of federal prison and into a halfway house in Atlanta, with a scheduled full release date of November 11th, 2026. He was back in the world. And the first question was the one it always is when someone comes home from a bid. What is he going to do now? Is he going to slide? This time, that question hit different, because the alleged man responsible for killing his cousin is sitting in federal custody. The case is still open. The trial has not happened yet, and Quando Rondo is out here breathing free air. That combination had everybody watching his moves with a magnifying glass. The real question is, what does sliding actually look like in a situation this specific? The alleged mastermind is already behind bars. The federal government has already picked up the case. So if Quando wanted revenge, what form would it even take? Would he move on associates? Would he let the courts handle it? Would he do something that nobody could anticipate? Those questions were everywhere when he came home, and the answers have been coming in slower than anyone expected. Now let's talk about where Lil Durk's case actually stands, because this is critical context. Lil Durk is sitting in federal custody, facing serious charges connected to the alleged murder for hire conspiracy targeting Quando Rondo. He has pleaded not guilty, and his legal team has been fighting the case hard. The federal trial scheduled for August 20th, 2026 is one of the most significant moments the rap world has ever had to reckon with in a courtroom. If this goes to trial and produces a verdict, the ripple effects across the entire industry will be felt for years. But as of now, the allegations are allegations. Durk is locked up, Quando is out, and the dynamic between those two realities has the streets on edge. For those who know the culture, what this federal case represents on a structural level is how completely the legal system has changed the rules of this conflict. What started as a rap beef amplified by genuine grief over the loss of King Von eventually became something the Department of Justice decided required direct intervention. And once that happens, the old formulas for how beefs get resolved stop applying. You are no longer in a world where street retaliation settles the score. You are in a world where grand juries and federal sentencing guidelines and trials shape the outcome. Both Quando Rondo and Lil Durk, in very different ways, found themselves inside that machinery, and neither of them could simply slide their way out of it. Now let's go even deeper into the emotional reality. Quando Rondo did not just lose a cousin. He lost someone who died allegedly because someone wanted him dead. There is the sadness of absence. There is the anger at whoever is responsible. But underneath both of those is something heavier. There is the guilt of knowing that the person who died was standing in your shadow when the bullets came. That they were there because of you. That the life that ended was not even the life that was being aimed at. That kind of weight does not go away. It becomes part of how you see everything going forward. And for Quando Rondo, that weight has been pushing him in a direction that the streets are still trying to read. Now let's zoom out and look at what this entire situation says about where hip-hop is right now. Quando Rondo and Lil Durk are not the first artists to have a beef spill into the legal system, but the specific way this one is played out, with a murder for hire allegation, a federal indictment, and $1 million bounty allegedly placed on a rapper's head, puts this in a category that very few situations in the genre's history have ever reached. This is the federal government alleging that one of the biggest names in rap music paid to have someone killed, and the person that someone allegedly tried to kill is now the one walking free while the alleged buyer sits behind bars. That reversal of circumstance changes the nature of every question being asked about Quando Rondo right now. The 33 months Quando received were a forced pause from everything, a period of removal from the environment that had shaped him and that had taken Lul Pab. Whatever happened to him inside those walls, whatever he was thinking and praying and working through, it was happening in a context where the streets could not reach him and he could not reach them. That kind of separation sometimes creates enough space for a different version of yourself to take root, or it creates enough space for a plan to solidify. And that is the question nobody has been able to fully answer since he walked back out. When Quando Rondo came home, the version of himself that walked back out into the world was shaped by everything that had happened since that night in August 2022. By the grief of losing Lou Pab, by the faith he had been building, by the time he had served, by the federal case sitting over the head of the man prosecutors alleged ordered his death, and by the awareness sharper now than it had ever been that every move he makes is being watched. People have been treating his return like the opening scene of something, like the quiet before a storm. And maybe they are right, or maybe the storm already passed, and what is left is a man who decided that surviving was the hardest and most important thing he could do for Lou Pab's memory. At the end of the day, Quando Rondo's situation is not just about a rap feud or a federal case. It is about what happens to a person when the violence they have been surrounded by finally takes someone irreplaceable. It is about whether that loss turns you into a weapon or turns you into something harder to define. The story does not have a clean ending yet. Lil Durk is in federal custody. The trial is coming. Quando is out here moving, and the question of whether he slid for Lou Pab and what that slide actually looked like is still one that nobody has a clean answer to. But if the version of sliding he chose was refusing to become another casualty of the same world that took his cousin, then that might be the most significant move he has ever made. Not with a gun, with a choice. A choice made in the shadow of a loss that never fully heals, in the quiet of a cell, in the words of a prayer offered up for a cousin who deserved more time. What are your thoughts on where Quando Rondo goes from here? Drop them in the comments below and tap in with the video on screen for more. For y'all who might not fully understand what it means to try to leave that life behind when you have been as deep in it as Quando Rondo was, let me explain something. It is not a simple transaction. You do not just announce it and walk away clean. There are relationships built on that life. There is an identity tied to it. And there is always the possibility that the world you are trying to leave will not let you leave it on your own timeline. Quando Rondo has been navigating all of that while carrying grief that most people will never understand, with everybody watching to see whether his next move is a prayer or something else entirely. And that is what makes this chapter different from everything that came before it. In hip-hop, we have seen beefs play out in diss tracks, in shootings and funerals. We have seen people retaliate, and we have seen people go to prison. But we have rarely seen a situation where one man is locked up facing federal murder for hire charges, while the person he allegedly tried to kill is walking around free and claiming to be changed. That dynamic is unprecedented, and it is exactly why nobody can stop talking about Quando Rondo right now. The transformation he has been describing publicly since Lou Pab died is either the most authentic thing he has ever shown the world or the most disciplined version of himself he has ever had to perform. From the outside, it is nearly impossible to tell the difference. That ambiguity is what keeps this story alive. Because as long as Durk is in federal custody and Quando is out here, the question of what sliding actually means stays open. It gets resolved by time, by what Quando Rondo does next. Real talk. The version of this story that gets the most attention is always the violent one, the version where somebody slides and somebody pays. But the version that actually matters, the one that has consequences that outlast a single moment of retaliation, is the one Quando Rondo appears to be living. A version where he is still here, still carrying Lou Pab's name, and still refusing to become the next casualty in a conflict that has already taken too much. What we know right now is that Lou Pab deserved more time. That a 24-year-old died allegedly because he was standing next to the wrong person on the wrong night. That the alleged architect of that tragedy is sitting in a federal facility waiting on a trial the entire rap world has circled on his calendar. And that Quando Rondo, the man who was allegedly the real target that night, is out here alive, moving, and carrying his cousin's name into whatever comes next. Whether that is revenge, redemption, or something that does not fit either category, the story is still being written. The street's been watching, the court's been moving, and somewhere in between, Quando Rondo is trying to figure out what it means to be alive when the person who was supposed to die alongside him did not make it. That question gets answered in the life he chooses to build from here, and that life is still in progress. Let's also think about what the Lil Durk federal case means for the culture on a broader level. Because this is not just about two rappers and a personal beef. This is about what happens when the entertainment world and the criminal world overlap in a way that the federal government can no longer ignore. Lil Durk built one of the most successful independent rap empires in recent memory. Only the family grew from a Chicago drill collective into a label with real industry power. And now the man at the center of all of that is sitting in a federal holding facility with a murder for hire charge hanging over his head. That fall connects directly to Quando Rondo, to Lul Pab, to a gas station in Los Angeles on a summer night in 2022. And it makes the whole thing feel both enormous and deeply personal at the same time. For Quando Rondo, navigating all of that while also trying to rebuild his own life after federal time is a weight that most people cannot fully appreciate from the outside. He came home to a world where the alleged orchestrator of his cousin's death is locked up, where his own legal situation is winding down, where his faith is giving him a framework for processing things that have no clean resolution, and where every single person watching him is asking the same question: what is he going to do? The answer so far has not been what anyone expected, and whether that answer holds is the part of this story that has not been written yet. Do you think Quando Rondo slid for Lou Pab, or is there still more to come? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and tap in with the video on screen for more.